The Atlanta Story is a podcast highlighting Atlanta's most interesting creators, entrepreneurs, and builders. I'm JC Lucas with Atlanta Ventures and co-producer alongside Jon Birdsong. In this episode, Jon sits down with Neal Cohen, co-founder of Tip Top Proper Cocktails. Before starting a fast-growing cocktails in a can company, Neal was helping brands create unique experiences at Superfly. One particular industry he worked in was music festivals, where he collaborated with his now co-founder, Yoni Reisman. In today's episode, we talk about the early days of Tip Top and the idea behind cocktails in a can, how the drink goes to market, a touch about the recipe and craft behind the cocktail, plus much more. We hope you enjoy the show and subscribe to The Atlanta Story.
Neal Cohen, welcome to the Atlanta Story podcast.
Hi, Jon. Thanks for having me. Good to be here.
Well, we're excited for you being here, and like we were talking about before, 2021 is a brand new year, and all the exciting things coming ahead. So, particularly with Tip Top Proper Cocktails, so much to discuss and dive into today. When was the moment that you knew the American public or the world would be open to drinking a Manhattan or an old fashioned out of a can?
The moment. This comes out of the music world, the music festival world. My business partner, Yoni, and I were deep into that world. He founded Governor's Ball Music Festival in New York. And I was marketing director at Superfly, producers of Bonnaroo, Outside Lands, Comedy Central's Clusterfest, a lot of big festivals. And we knew that people were used to getting great cocktails when they went to restaurants, when they went to a lot of places. Like the cocktail boom sort of started happening 10 years ago, and a lot of businesses adjusted to that. But a lot of businesses, because of the care that it takes to make a great cocktail, just aren't afforded that opportunity because they're high volume or because the training it requires. And I think the opportunity to be able to serve a good cocktail at a festival was just obvious. Everywhere you went, that people like us do this, right?
Yep.
People that go to music festivals go to great restaurants. They go to cocktail bars. They are seekers of culture. And cocktail scene bubbling up in the culture meant that there just wasn't, there was an opportunity there. Both as a consumer, I wanted a great cocktail in that space, as well as being a part of the production team on an event like that. That there was just a desire and a need, and it wasn't being filled.
Was there a time? So it sounds like the first customer was you. You and Yoni, right?
Yeah, you're never supposed to use yourself as the sample.
Right.
But then again, I think some of the best brands are built on gut and built on a need and solving a problem.
Yep.
And this was something that, I'll give Yoni the credit on, that he had been sitting in the trenches looking at the concessions programs of Governor's Ball Music Festival and seeing, he would go in and just watch the numbers come in during the festival itself. Like everybody's out there, hands up, enjoying like Kanye West or like Deadmau5, and he's sitting there like watching, just analyzing like what's going on with this concessions program and how can we, figure out how to better serve the public.
Sure.
And
so did y'all go in with the idea that this was a growing market in terms of, a high-end alcohol drink in a can? Did you know that this market was growing, or how did you know it would be a good business?
Yeah, I mean, we started seeing the trends, right? But it just felt like the category had so much further to go.
Yep.
That when you went out and you tried the offering out there, it just didn't hit the marks. And that for someone who would spend time going to a great cocktail bar or, would prefer a cocktail when they sit down at a restaurant over what's in their wine or beer program, that they just weren't being served with the needs. And we wanted to elevate that and make that more accessible too. I think what's at the core of what we're doing with these tiny cans of cocktails is that the great cocktail experience has had a pretty high barrier to entry. You either need to go to a great cocktail bar and spend upwards of $10, $15 to find out if you even like a Manhattan, first and foremost, or you need to purchase all the ingredients, develop the know-how, and take the time to make it for yourself, usually at home.
Right.
So where's the opportunity to take it to a friend's house? Where's the opportunity on a picnic? Where's, the opportunity to serve it quickly in a high volume space like a music festival? And that's really at the core of this idea of sort of unlocking the cocktail experience, unleashing it to more people on more occasions, to be a little grandiose about it, democratizing the authentic cocktail experience.
It makes total sense. And when you talk about at a picnic or you talk about bringing it over to our friends, you're not going to bring all the ingredients over to make, a Negroni to a friend's, right? You're not going to, you're just not going to do that. So if there's a Venn diagram of, okay, you've got the high-end $15 Manhattan at a nice bar or lounge, and you've got, the governor's ball attendee that is probably, either drinking vodka or beer. Help us describe the overlap in terms of the vision y'all had. I mean, do you envision people will drink a Manhattan, front row, or is it more the crowd in the back that's like, I'm gonna chill out a little bit, I'm gonna have that Manhattan vibe and experience, but I'm not gonna be, slim in like a Bud Light, like front row.
Yeah, I think the question touches on where the idea came from versus where it developed, because we wanted to solve a problem, dove into it, worked with Miles McQuarrie at Kimball House to develop our recipes and really think about, and if you don't know Miles and the Kimball House and Watchman's over at Krog Street, best cocktails in town, the guy is just meticulous about building his cocktails off of classics and really, he's been extremely innovative. He's 7 times recognized by the James Beard Foundation, been a finalist several times over for Kimball House. But what he really does is understands the mechanics of all these different traditional styles of cocktails before taking it off in whatever direction and sort of perfecting the classics. So with these cocktails, we went to him because we're music guys. We don't know. We can make a cocktail just fine, but not for the general public like this. So we really pride ourselves on knowing what we don't know, and being willing to, admit that and find the right people to bring into that, that endeavor. And so with Miles began the process of, well, if we're gonna can a cocktail, what really makes sense to can? What's really going to get as close to, and now it's not going to duplicate the experience of sitting at a bar and having your favorite bartender make it for you, but what's going to get closest to that experience and make sense in a can? And we started with these 3, not because they're necessarily the front row, hands in the air cocktail at your concert, which is where the idea came from, but really because we knew they would be great in terms of being loyal to the traditional recipes, and in terms of being shelf stable. We're not putting anything in this can that is going to degrade in quality over the time that it might take from production to distributor to retailer to the point where it's in the hands of the consumer who's actually drinking it.
I want to get into the mechanics of how it is made. But before we do that, let's take a step back to grew up in Atlanta, went to University of Michigan, American culture studies. What are some of your favorite time periods in American culture that have shaped who you are today?
I mean, I'm gonna go straight for like I was a jam band hippie kid in middle school already, school, high school. So definitely idealized the 60s for a long portion of my life. And certainly think a lot about that time period and kind of revolutionary ideas and the cultural shifts that happened then. You mentioned the American culture degree, and I ended up taking a few classes with this professor, Bruce Conforth, who was the original curator of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Wow.
In Cleveland. And one of the classes I took with him was the blues, the American blues, and the mythology and sociology behind the blues. And that idea of just storytelling, Robert Johnson going down to the crossroads, and just kind of the way that we've all got these mythologies ingrained in us around all of history. And it's really just about who shaped the right mythology and who told a great story.
Yep.
And, I think it sort of applies across the board to the work I've been lucky to find myself doing, whether it was music festivals and thinking about, from 2010 to 2018, that was my world.
Yeah. I mean, so 7 years at Superfly, which, iconic music festivals. What did you learn at Superfly that you took to Tip Top?
So many things. I gotta think about that. First of all, just the people. I mean, the community, the festival community, is still a huge touch point for me. I'm talking to people weekly that touch back to that space, whether they've moved on into other areas of media or they're still figuring out, how to make kind of live music work at this current very strange time for live music.
It's coming back.
It is. Oh yeah, absolutely. And everybody's figuring out ways. And we just recently were involved in a Save Tipitina's the storied New Orleans venue event. But going back to what I've learned, like I said, so many things, but where I was in marketing and started off really from more of a journalistic background. I had come from radio here in Atlanta. I worked at AM 1690, the Voice of the Arts.
Yes.
And I was the music director there for a few years, really helped develop a lot of that programming there. Some stuff that was very American culture oriented.
Favorite venue in Atlanta?
Oh man. A Variety Playhouse, Tabernacle, Fox Theater, Terminal West in terms of like the newer kind of world of Atlanta. There's a lot of great venues here. But one of the things that we were doing was we were really churning out a lot of content. The festival at Bonnaroo, we had just so much archival, like incredible footage of like Radiohead in 2006 and, Paul McCartney in 2013 and all these incredible acts. But, there wasn't a ton invested in social media and community development, especially in the online space. And this is 2011 when I came into Superfly, and we were kind of just throwing content out there, but without that ongoing engagement of the community and really understanding and listening to what people want versus just like sitting in a boardroom and kind of
putting stuff
pontificating, right? From your, from your throne. Like, it's just kind of like, you got to get in there. You got to understand the beats, the rhythms. You talk about the background in American culture, but I also studied cultural anthropology. I started looking at, the festival community, we dubbed them Bonnaroovians, and thinking about, what makes them tick? What are the beats and rhythms of their year? Yes. And thinking about, okay, in October, they're asking us for certain bands they want on the lineup.
Right.
Speculation, wish lists. Okay, let's drive a contest around make your dream concert poster and do that as user-generated content online, right? Around January, they're expecting the lineup. Sure, we could just drop it on a poster. We could just drop it with a video. But instead, let's do this wacky live on YouTube hosted by Weird Al with Portugal the Man on it, like kind of, like fund drive, kind of like, cable access TV fun thing, and make it a holiday.
Yeah.
If you've got a community and, people who are connecting to each other via your brand,
Yep.
Create those same beats of culture that you see, duplicated over time. And that's where kind of going back to the perspective, the lens that, studying culture and anthropology sort of lends me as a marketer.
Yeah. Vital. Let's talk about your entrepreneurial muscle, right? Did you always know that you wanted to be an entrepreneur?
I come from a family that's a family business.
Mm-hmm.
The entire sort of West Midtown, there was a solid 2 blocks of scrap metal recycling yard called Central Metals.
Yeah.
That was my family business from, the turn of the 20th century until right there at the end, like around 98. And so very enterprising.
Sure.
Certainly always kind of saw myself as creative, but really the entrepreneurial spirit of this company in large part is Yoni, my business partner. And we grew up together in Atlanta. We met each other in elementary school at Greenfield Hebrew Academy, which is now AJA. And, we came up together and we were always throwing ideas out. For a while, we wanted to start a brewery venue out of college. It was like 5 of our friends. We actually started an LLC and we were like, we're going to start a brewery venue.
Yep.
And we threw some events at Sweetwater and we just kind of started dipping our toe into it. But for him, he's just always piecing apart what is and what should be. Like, just because this exists like this right now does not mean that's what I have to accept. And this is like compulsive. It's not like he's decided this is his philosophy. It's just the way the world works for him is, yeah, I know that's how it's done, but how do we do it better? Is that right? Mm-hmm. And, on a day-to-day basis, that can kind of create some interesting push and pull. But in the end, the results become something like Tip Top, where, the writing was kind of on the wall that this should happen.
Right.
But there's so many reasons not to do it.
Yes.
There's so many reasons not to do it. The industry tells you there's so many big players, let them do it. They're going to crush you or whatever. And you got to have kind of the audacity to just jump in and do it and commit.
So many entrepreneurs have, this is a cool idea. This should be done. And then it takes one next step of belief, blind faith, audacity to say, I'm going to start this company, right? I mean, what was it in Tip Top that said, we're going to start this company? What was that faith? Was it the faith in that? Well, you tell me. What did y'all see that no one else saw?
I think it was that there was a need. I think that whether it was from our experience on the business side, that there was a need to be able to expand the offering at concessions, or it was looking and saying, okay, all these people are spending all this time in pursuing cocktail bars. Mm-hmm. What do they drink every other night of the week if they're not making it themselves?
Right.
What do they take when they go camping? What are they drinking when they sit down for a flight? What are they, drinking at home when they're just lazy? What are they bringing to their friend's house, right? And it was very clear, right when we launched, it just took.
Yeah.
And that was actually, it was very exciting.
Right.
And it was exactly what we'd hoped for. But when it actually happens, you're like, what actually is happening here? Because when you walk into the liquor store, there's thousands of brands to choose from. Why are people picking up this thing?
Yeah.
And one of the reasons, I have a lot of theories there, but one of the reasons is that it just doesn't exist. And when you look at it, you're like, hey, why doesn't this exist? This makes too much sense and I'll give it a try.
Yeah. Well, thank you for bringing a couple samples here. I definitely want to not only do a tasting, but also just learn about the creation process from an ingredients perspective, why you chose these three. I mean, obviously you mentioned about preservation, shelf life, but why these three? And just talk to us about had this idea of a Manhattan in a can. It has now come to fruition, and from idea to the mechanics of getting it in this can, and why the size, and perhaps while we have a small tasting. Does that work, JC?
Yeah, I think now's a good time. I'll pour you some. We don't. It's 10:30 in the morning for those of you listening in whatever time warp we're in. But we're gonna start off with a Manhattan. This is a 62 proof traditional Manhattan. So it's rye whiskey, vermouth, and then Angostura bitters. And I mean, you ask about the size, right? And these cans are 3.4 ounces. For one, you can take it on past TSA. Cheers. But that's not why.
Smells good.
Tastes great too.
Wow.
Are you a Manhattan drinker?
I like Manhattan. I like Negronis. I like old fashions. I like gin and vodka too.
So all around fan. You asked why these three, and I already gave you kind of some of the technical reasons, but from a brand standpoint, you think of, I walked into this great bar in the East Village called Amore Amargo. And this guy, Suther Teague, is the bartender and kind of holds court there. There's like 10 stools there, and you sit down with him, and it's really focused on bitters.
Okay.
And so you can taste all these great Amaros and aperitifs, and you make some cocktails out of it. But on the wall, he's got 3 glasses and like a little mural that is old-fashioned Manhattan Negroni. Mm-hmm. And it's actually interesting because Yoni and Miles had already kind of narrowed to these 3 at that point. But I looked at it and it's like, you know what? Like, that's the trifecta of the bitter stirred cocktail category. These are the traditional ones that people know and love. And our brand is really about showing people that there's a great option that you can take more seriously out of a can. Yeah, and so
that is a Delta flight paradise right there.
That'd be great. That's the dream. When for a consumer who's saying, the canned cocktail category is not for me, they're looking across the shelf and there's, any number of kind of vodka sodas, like crazy Alabama slammers and lemon drops and all that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. They come across a brand and they see this, sophisticated giraffe.
Right.
and the sophisticated giraffe serving old fashions, Manhattans, and Negronis. It's like, that's a signal, right? Yeah. Like, this is actually speaking my language.
Yes.
These are the types of drinks that are at the core for me. And, they're stirred, they're boozy, spirit forward for the sophisticated. And, the 3.4 ounces, if you think about making a Manhattan, a Negroni, or an old fashioned, I could break it down to Manhattan, right? You're going to do 2 ounces of whiskey. Yep. You're going to do an ounce of vermouth. You're going to do some dashes of bitters, and you're going to dilute that over some ice, and you're going to pour it up. I mean, 3.4 ounces in this can, you wouldn't want a serving that's beyond that.
Right.
Right? Negroni, traditionally 1 to 1 to 1, where you take gin, vermouth, Campari, and it's just 1 ounce of each, dilute it a little over ice, because that's a key part of making a cocktail, pour it out, you've got a drink that's roughly 3.4 ounces. This is the right can for these types of drinks.
How did you guys decide on which wholesale in terms of,
in terms of the spirit
whiskey?
sourcing?
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
It's an interesting world. As I said, Yoni and I don't come from the spirits world, but
Right.
you take a peek behind the curtain and so much of the spirits are being made in the same places and then bought by these brands in bulk and enhanced in different ways, different agings and things along those lines.
Sure.
So we started investigating, what's out there and what's going to meet the right price point for us to be able to make this at roughly on average $5 a can, right? Make it
Wow.
really affordable for people to have a cocktail experience. And in tasting with Miles.
That's almost as inexpensive as a one IPA for some folks.
Yeah, that's right. And people are comparing it to what they pay at a bar, $12, right?
Yeah.
So we tasted all the kind of spirits available for these cocktails with Miles. We'd go to Kimball House with a bunch of samples and kind of taste through, and he'd make an old fashioned out of this or that and kind of see how it reacts. And we ended up selecting our whiskeys from MGP.
Okay.
And that is one of the distillers that provides spirits for something like 60% of spirit brands in the U.S.
Yeah.
So a lot of brands you know and love are actually just a shiny kind of
A nice wrapping.
outward appearance on MGP spirits.
Right.
And, bourbon collectors, they seek out 15-year MGP bourbons and things
Right.
along those lines. So while they are a bulk spirits provider, they're doing a great job. For the other spirits, for the gin, the vermouth, the red bitter, as we call it, because Campari's licensed and, we couldn't really afford to use that anyway. Those are all blends that we've created.
Sure. And we're going to take a quick break here and share that this podcast is brought to you by Atlanta Ventures. If you are looking to start the next $300 million business out of Atlanta, check out the studio at atlantaventures.com. You talked about this need, right? I mean, you can even see it with the brand, right? The engagement of y'all's community, right? Well, after that sip, our community. And,
Welcome to the fold.
Yeah, exactly. A couple things. How did you know? Or let me ask a simple question. You go to your website. You've had a plethora of people write about y'all. How do you get good press? Or how do you get press? And you're a former writer, journalist, marketer, are all kind of being mashed together in this age of social media. But when anyone goes to y'all's website, it's New York Times, it's Bon
Appetit, Washington Post.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, we are punching way above our weight class in press. And it's something we talk about a lot and try to figure it out, because what's this little baby brand out of Georgia that was only available in Georgia up until a couple months ago? We've now expanded to a few more markets and we're available online. But what's this brand doing getting this kind of press, especially if it's not even accessible to most of the country yet,
right.
USA Today's top 10 canned cocktails, right? All of these things. And for one, canned cocktails are the trend of the moment. They were before COVID, and just like so many things in this time, they've accelerated,
right?
Because it just kind of aligns with the needs of the world. But when an outlet like the New York Times wants to tell the story of, hey, canned cocktails, this is now a legitimate category that you as New York Times reader shouldn't be writing off anymore. They look across the offering and they say, what helps me tell that story, right? We know there's a lot of new ones coming out, so we know this is a trend. But if I really want to get attention of the Bon Appetit reader, the Garden and Gun reader, the one that said, no, I'd rather mix it myself, or I'd rather go to my favorite bar and get it. what's going to tell that story? And they look at this, and it's got this sort of timeless appeal.
Yes.
There's the vintage look. There's the giraffe. There's these little like deco kind of art frames that we were inspired by a 1929 French cocktail book to kind of develop those for each cocktail. Kind of has their own little, geometric design. Mm-hmm. And I think for one, it's brand, right? They see it, and it's got, and this is not a word I would have used until it was given to me, but it's got an iconic feel to it.
Yeah.
But two, how do you get good press? Be a real person. Don't hide behind a publicist. Yes, we have a PR team, and they do an incredible job. Shout out to Sprout House. They do an amazing job. But we hustle, and I learned the phrase "fortune favors the bold" from the editor of Garden and Gun. We had sent some samples back last year at this time in December. They said, we're kind of bogged down with holidays. We'll wait on this story. And we were in Charleston, where Garden and Gun is situated, and we were having breakfast. Yoni and I and our COO Paul Beaupre, and Yoni pulled up his phone. He said, "Hey, Garden and Gun's in this same building." Said, okay, well, let's drop off some cans. Let's jog their memory. It's 2 months later. It's time. So we went in, or we went to the door. We're outside. We're ringing the doorbell. No one's answering. And we're saying, we've got a meeting to get to. We got to go. And I'm like, hey, hold on. Let me just place a phone call real quick. Mm-hmm. And I call their office. Someone picks up. They're like, oh, I'm so sorry. The person who usually works the front desk just isn't in today. Let me buzz you up.
Nice.
So they buzz us up. We go in. See the woman who had buzzed us up. She said, hey, I said, I'm dropping these off for the editor. Our PR team kind of has been in contact with him. She said, hey, hold on. He actually likes to talk to people when they come by sometimes. Let's see if he's available. He comes strutting down the hall, big smile on his face, says, gentlemen, we were just talking about you this morning. You have impeccable timing. Our writer intern had just brought us back up. Brought you back up as a story this morning, and here you are.
Wow.
He said, indeed, fortune favors the bold.
Uh-huh.
And out of that, we had an article come out like 2 or 3 weeks later that really, moved the needle for us. People love Garden and Gun. It's like a true lifestyle brand. And then when Charleston Food and Wine happened, like a couple of weeks later, I was back through town, and the cocktails were kind of paired with a photo shoot for all the chefs that were in town that were going by Garden and Gun. So then all of a sudden, Kevin Gillespie, is posting our cocktail on his Instagram. I've been following that guy since Woodfire Grill and all the Top Chef. I was always rooting him on. I was just like thrilled to see that. And then it culminates with us winning the Made in the South award in the beverage category just in November here. Wow. Which has just sparked incredible amount of consumer sales, as well as interest from resorts all down the southern coast. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's really incredible. So how do you get good press? You put yourself out there.
Right.
You just be willing, that voice inside that says, hey, this is kind of an inconvenience, or, hey, they're going to judge you, and, don't go in there. You're just a small guy. Like, why? They're not really fight that, push through it. And be bold.
Well said. Well said. Did y'all create the logo before the drink, or the drink before the logo? How did you? Because this feels. I feel like I can take this out on an airplane and like proudly place it right next to the aisle, so people walk by and are like, "Oh wow, what is that?"
Yeah, I mean, in a time where we were taking meetings out at like restaurants or coffee shops or whatever, just putting these cans out on the table always sparked someone walking by asking, hey, what's that? And honestly, that's the best marketing we have, this can. Anything, you talk about the buzzword of like 5 years ago was disruption. And when someone's looking across the bar or just sees this can, that instinct to say, hey, what's that? And not just order that beer they were about to order is everything for us. Mm-hmm. It's going to change those habits. So the can's everything. But sorry, the question was about...
Did y'all create the logo first?
Oh, right.
The logo brand feel.
It was called Tip Top as we were developing the drinks. That was a phrase that Yoni gravitated towards through like a lot of just brainstorming, but it just felt right for these classic and familiar cocktails to have a phrase that maybe Grandpa would say when you're asking him how he's doing that day.
Yeah.
You know, that kind of fit. But in terms of the design, these things take a long time to develop an alcohol brand, to go through the governmental kind of all the hurdles you got to go through to get a product to market in the alcohol space. So we had a lot of time to create the branding, luckily, because we were really honed in and focused on getting it right. So we went to Bart Sasso. He's a designer from Atlanta. He was the original creative director for Holman and Finch.
Yep.
Ticonderoga Club is his baby.
Greg Best.
Yep. Yeah. So he's one of the partners with Greg and Paul at Ticonderoga.
Nice.
So all the pens and all the new shirts and all the new menus and all these crazy kind of design elements that brand has, he's just churning that out all the time. He understands the space. He understands the people. And we sat with him and, you know, gave him the rundown of what we were going to do. And yeah, so I think we were probably done with the recipe development and knew which cocktails we were coming out with. All of this is a little bit blurry because it was all happening kind of simultaneously. But yeah, I think we were still definitely going through like all of the signing off from the government about like, here's your formula and here's the different ingredients and those are okay to use and here's how it's represented on your label. And I mean, it's really a pretty arduous process.
Well, tell us about distribution, right? So,
can I open one more cocktail before we talk about distribution?
Of course, yeah.
Okay, let's go Negroni. We went from Manhattan to Negroni here.
Okay.
Did you hear that noise?
Yes, I did.
So Coca-Cola's trademarked like that click and then the sizzle.
Uh-huh.
I like the way this can just kind of like has this like little pop, you know?
So
distribution, yeah.
Negroni, yeah, let's talk about I'm going to sip this one out of a can and just see. I mean, is it meant to be poured or will people?
So we built each of these cocktails. As I said, we didn't know. We wanted to make it palatable in all environments.
Okay.
We're not trying to change the way you consume the cocktail itself, though. Part of drinking an old fashioned or a Negroni is that it's over a big cube and it sort of dilutes over time, and like that thing is something that's sort of sacred to the tradition of these cocktails. So we built them to be able to stand up to ice. The Manhattan was built to stand up to ice, but I prefer to throw it in the freezer and then just drink it really cold out of the can or out of a coupe. The old fashioned, the Negroni, I tend to drink it over ice when you can.
Okay.
But still tastes great if it's super cold out of the can.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Before we get to distribution, wow. Before we get to distribution, we always talk about it in the Atlanta Ventures office. You know, people who are disrupting things, they're also going to disrupt a certain way of life, and not everyone's going to like that. Have you gotten pushback from bartenders on and cocktail connoisseurs on hey, opening a can, pouring it out isn't even closely remote to what I can do as someone who does this all day, every day? I mean, are there people who are saying, or do they embrace it more as you're widening the market, right? Because here's someone that would never have had a Manhattan because that's not in their lexicon, and now they get it in a can. They open it. What have you, a year of getting the product out, what have you experienced?
Yes. A lot of people have, there's people who want to whether it's they're defensive or not comfortable with their own position, or they want to protect the sacredness of this tradition of cocktails that's gone on for so long. Yeah, of course, we run into a lot of critique, and we expected it.
Yep.
What I find that often those who are really comfortable in their position in this space see it, get it, understand it, know where it works, taste it. They approve of it. We want to get it in front of that crowd kind of more than anyone else, because if they're tasting it, they're saying, "Hey, I'm not going to serve it at my cocktail bar. Of course not. I'm juicing fresh juices all day. I'm making all these tinctures. What am I going to do? People don't come to my cocktail bar for that. Great. Fine. Mm-hmm. But if you're going to have a banquet in your private space, or if you're going to a mountain home and you don't want to be mixing cocktails for all your friends because you're the guy that's supposed to do that all weekend, like, we want them feeling great about the fact that this is a really loyal version of what they expect to get when they open one of these cocktails. So, yeah, I mean, all you have to do is go look at our social media, to see that people are like, if you want an old fashioned, just make it yourself. Like, it's an easy cocktail. Yes, it's a simple cocktail, but if you're going to get it right and have it consistent every time, like, to me, like, these cocktails, that's like saying, I can buy cola syrup and make my own Coca-Cola every time if I want to, in a way. And
I'm tasting this Negroni. I had a Negroni a week ago, and this is smoother. It doesn't have that, sometimes you get a strong Negroni, and you're like, ow.
Interesting you say that. I'll say it here. We're still figuring out how much noise we want to make about it, but you talk about the real, like, cocktail loyalist crowd, the craft cocktail crowd. There is some critique of our Negroni that's a touch sweet. It's not enough bitter. But then again, like, people love our Negroni. I love our Negroni. Mm-hmm. We are adjusting the formula. We always want to get better and make this offering as close to what people's expectations of this cocktail are supposed to be. So we've toned down a little bit of the sweetness. We've upped some of the gin and bitter components. So you're getting that bright botanical gin flavor. You're getting that nice bitter that you'd expect from the Campari element in there. That will start to hit market in the next couple of months. Yeah.
As y'all get bitter, you may find people like this more than the loud punch of the Campari and different brands. Who knows?
Yeah, but that's not a reason to go there.
Sure.
Right? For us, these cocktails are a formula that we don't need to do market research to know that people like old fashions, Manhattans, and Negronis. Right. That these cocktails have been around for over 100 years. So, one of the reasons why we went after Negroni, and we, every once in a while we have people saying, "Hey, what is that?" Right? Or why did you choose that? That's like kind of esoteric. Mm-hmm. And it's because there's a cult of this drink.
Right.
People who like it, love it, and they want to talk about it. And kind of like IPAs 10 years ago.
Yep.
Where if you liked IPAs, it was kind of like a badge where you were going to take your buddy to Brick store and test them. Hey, can you handle this level of hops and bitter and all these complexities? Right? Same thing with the Negroni. Like, the culinary crowd gravitates towards the Negroni because it kind of takes you on this journey.
Yeah.
That first, like, the upfront is sort of the botanical gin brightness. Mm-hmm. It carries over into this, like, sweet and richness of vermouth. Yep. And then it's balanced by this finish that's dry and bitter of the Campari. That's just kind of like, for someone who's really into exploring flavors, that's why the Negroni is kind of this, like, pet drink of the cocktail community.
Yeah. Well, we're coming up on time, and I can't thank you enough for your time today. A few more questions on where do you get it? How do you get it? How do you sell it? I mean, can you go get one? Can you go get you sell it in packages? First question. Second question, how's the traction, right? I mean, It sounds like you guys are getting, well, particularly the community online, and there's definitely a need. What's the future hold?
Yeah, it's an exciting time. When we launched this product as single can on the counter at retail, you can buy it for roughly $5, sometimes less, sometimes a little more. That's not for us to determine. But because it's this tiny can, retailers aren't going to put it in the back of the store. They want to keep an eye on it because it hides in pockets well. So it kind of forces the counter, which is the most strategic place to be in the store for impulse buy for a new product. So you're going to find this at liquor stores right there up on the counter in this nice gravity feed kind of element that really asks you to grab it. And then what we're kind of scaling up to is an 8-pack. So the way that 5 Hour Energy kind of had their trial at the counter, impulse buy. And then once you tried it, you'd go back to the shelf and buy the multi-pack. So that's the way we're introducing it into new markets, is still single on the counter to start with, because we want to keep that counter space sacred to us. That's really pivotal.
And what degree of penetration do you have in Georgia? Like, can I go to Tower right now and get it? Okay.
Yeah. I mean, we're in all the major stores. We're in all the boutique stores. We're in, over 200 liquor stores around Georgia. We, in August, launched in Texas, Colorado, and South Carolina.
Wow.
We are, I don't know if this is an exclusive, but we're launching Florida and New York early 2021.
Y'all heard it her first.
And one thing that's super, super exciting for us right now, and it's been a big focus even pre-COVID, although the trends have definitely gone in this direction, is e-commerce. And we just... October 30th of 2020, we launched an e-commerce store on our site. It's tricky. We always wanted to do it. We're coming from the music festival space, which meant that digital marketing drove to the conversion of buying a ticket online. In the alcohol space, especially in spirits, that's been really, really difficult to achieve. So I mentioned Yoni's kind of meticulous focus on solving problems. It doesn't have to be this way. So he just dove in with this maniacal focus around, how do we unlock e-commerce? How do we make that really a driver for us? And that's pre-COVID, and obviously accelerated by buying habits, if you look at any of the stats right now.
Yeah.
And so in the first month, since October 30th, we sold 12,000 cans online.
Wow.
Which is equivalent or better than most months we've done in traditional distribution in any state.
That is...
It's staggering. And now I will say that's not straight to our pocket, because the way that this works is we're not selling it.
Right.
It's, it looks like direct to consumer on our website, but what we've had to do is sort of back channel and figure out, okay, we're going to create this storefront, but what it's actually doing is, connecting to the retailer on the ground that's going to fulfill shipping. So we're now available via the storefront on our website to 25 states around the country for shipping.
Yep.
But that's fulfilled by a retailer, elsewhere.
Which they like that, right?
They love it. And then there's another retailer who fulfills to 48 states around the country. So we see enormous potential there. All this incredible press that we've been getting.
Yeah.
I just can't imagine if we were sitting here without the e-commerce component saying, yeah, I think the depletion there at that liquor store and them reordering probably has to do with that Made in the South award. Well, it's 2020.
Yeah.
Data and marketing allows you to be, if we could figure out the route, and we have, allows us to really understand where this traffic is coming from, really understand the sales patterns, who's buying, where they're buying. And when we go to launch the next 3 cocktails, which are going to be a departure from our stirred variety here that we have, but in the same can, we're going with 3 shaken cocktails in the new year.
Wow.
And when that happens, we will understand so much better about how to approach the distributors in each one of these markets, because we'll have sales data to come and say, hey, this is the one that's hitting in your market. Don't pick up all 6 in our line. Right. Pick up these 3, because we don't want it going somewhere to just sit. No. You know, we want it to fit what the audience wants. So,
well, Neal, this has been a very insightful and engaging conversation. We always like to end the conversation on the Atlanta Story podcast with why Atlanta and what has Atlanta done for you?
I've never been more excited to be a part of the Atlanta community than I am right now. Grew up here, suburban, but here. Moved back here after going to college in Ann Arbor, Michigan, for a few years with the AM 1690 stint. Moved to New York for 7 years, and now back here for 2.5 years. And coming back these last 2.5 years has been really a revelation. So many things that were kind of bubbling below the surface of Atlanta, whether it's the creative scene, the music scene, the food scene, social engagement, like just so many things are coming to a head right now in this city. And I obviously from a political standpoint, like I've just felt this outpouring of love from people I know far and wide. All eyes on Georgia right now, right? Specifically Atlanta, though, leading the charge. And, you know, being able to connect the dots with the creative community here too, whether that's Bart Sasso on the design front. We work with Luke Beard a lot as our photographer, which is, I think, how I find myself sitting here today.
I think so, yeah.
One of our photographers, Austin Ray, who's been a big writer and journalist in Atlanta for music and drinks for a long time, has helped a lot with our copywriting.
He's great work.
He's a great guy. You know, we were talking about Brian Steely, who's been on this podcast, and he just did a merch design for us. But just the creativity and the energy of Atlanta. Hey, this is coming from a guy who spent 7 years in Brooklyn.
Yep.
Right? But in Brooklyn, it's expected. In Atlanta, it is just so refreshing and energizing to see how all of these components are coming together to really put us on the map as, you know, the culture capital of the South. Not that it hasn't been always, but it is just percolating and peaking to the point where like the attention's here. Mm-hmm. And I look at the history of Atlanta where old school, it was Coca-Cola, Delta, CNN, right? You got the turning point of the 96 Olympics where it sort of began to open up to a wider world, and then tech boom, and you know, you've got the MailChimps and King of Pops here, and like all these new brands, Atlanta United kind of leading the charge on, hey, you moved from a different city and you still have your baseball and football team, but you can embrace the soccer team here, right? And like that unification of the energy that's happening here, it's exciting to be a young and growing brand and hopefully play a role in that story.
Well, Neal, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. We really appreciate it. And thanks for being part of the Atlanta Story.
Cool. Thank you.
This podcast is brought to you by Atlanta Ventures. It was co-produced by JC Lucas and Jon Birdsong. If you are looking to start the next $300 million business in Atlanta, check out the studio at atlantaventures.com and the companies we work with who've done it before. Thank you for listening to this episode. If you enjoyed it, please share it at your next coffee meeting or dinner greeting, rate it, and write a benevolent, eloquent review.